Lane Frost picked up a saddle without looking at the name. "That's Red Rock," whispered a veteran. 309 cowboys failed to ride him. The young Oklahoman shrugged and headed toward the chute. What happened next became rodeo legend forever. Subscribe and comment where you're watching from. Do you think skill can overcome any challenge? Let's ride. The dust hadn't even settled from the previous ride when Lane Frost walked into the competitors' area at the Cheyenne Frontier Days. The 24-year-old cowboy from Atoka, Oklahoma, moved with that easy confidence that came from years of living and breathing rodeo. His weathered hat sat perfectly on his head, and his spurs clinked rhythmically against the concrete floor as he approached the sign-up board. "You signing up for today's challenge ride?" asked Tommy Morrison, a grizzled stock contractor who'd been around the circuit longer than most cowboys had been alive. His voice carried a mixture of curiosity and something else, something that sounded almost like warning. Lane nodded, scanning the list of available bulls. "Just looking for a good ride, Tommy. Something that'll give the crowd their money's worth." Tommy's weathered face cracked into what might have been a grin or a grimace. "Well, son, we got exactly what you're looking for." He pointed to a name scrawled at the bottom of the list in faded ink. Red Rock. The name meant nothing to Lane. He'd been traveling from rodeo to rodeo for weeks, his focus entirely on perfecting his technique and building his reputation. He hadn't heard the whispered conversations in the stands, the hushed tones cowboys used when they talked about certain bulls. All he saw was an opportunity. "Red Rock it is," Lane said, picking up the clipboard and signing his name with the same casual confidence he brought to everything else. Tommy's eyes widened. "Son, you know what you just signed up for." But Lane was already walking away, his attention caught by the familiar sight of riggers and ropes hanging from the fence. He had that pre-ride ritual to complete, the same one he'd been perfecting since he was 15 years old. Behind him, Tommy Morrison stood frozen, watching the young cowboy disappear into the maze of chutes and equipment. In 30 years of working rodeo stock, he'd never seen anyone sign up for Red Rock with such casual indifference. Most cowboys studied that name for long minutes before walking away. The smart ones asked questions first. The afternoon sun beat down mercilessly on the Cheyenne arena as cowboys began preparing for their rides. In the distance, the crowd was already gathering, their excited chatter mixing with the bellowing of bulls and the metallic clang of chute gates. Lane methodically worked through his preparation routine, adjusting his rigging, testing his grip, stretching muscles that had been tightened by countless rides on countless bulls. "Hey, Oklahoma," called out Jake Stevens, a veteran rider from Texas who'd been watching Lane's preparation with growing concern. "You really gonna try Red Rock today?" Lane looked up from his rigging, genuine puzzlement crossing his face. "That's the plan." "Why? You know something I should know?" Jake's expression shifted from concern to something approaching disbelief. "Boy, where you been the last 3 years? That bull's put more cowboys in the dirt than any other animal on the circuit. 309 tries, 309 failures. Most of them didn't even make it to 4 seconds. The information hit Lane like cold water, but instead of backing down, something else flickered in his eyes. It wasn't fear. It was the same look he got when someone told him something couldn't be done. The atmosphere around the chutes had shifted dramatically once word spread that someone had actually signed up to ride Red Rock. Cowboys who'd been casually preparing for their own rides now clustered around Lane, their conversations a mixture of admiration and concern. 309, repeated Cody Lambert, shaking his head. "That ain't just bad luck, Lane, that's a mathematical impossibility." But Lane was already moving toward the holding pens, his curiosity overriding any second thoughts. He needed to see this legendary bull for himself. As he approached the heavy steel gates, he could hear the animal before he could see it. A low, rumbling sound that seemed to vibrate through the ground itself. Red Rock stood in the corner of his pen like a monument to power. Nearly 2,000 pounds of muscle and attitude, the black bull's hide gleamed in the afternoon sun. His horns curved wickedly, and his eyes held an intelligence that unsettled even experienced stockmen. This wasn't just an animal. This was a competitor who'd learned to read cowboys as well as cowboys tried to read him. "Beautiful, ain't he?" Tommy Morrison had appeared beside Lane, his voice carrying a strange mixture of pride and worry. Been my star for 3 years now. Brings crowds from 5 states away just to watch cowboys try and fail. Lane studied the bull's movement, noting how Red Rock carried himself with complete confidence. There was no nervous energy, no wasted motion. Every step was calculated, every turn deliberate. This was an animal who knew exactly what he was capable of. "What makes him so tough?" Lane asked, genuinely curious rather than intimidated. Tommy scratched his graying beard. "Smart as a whip, for starters. Most bulls got 1 or 2 moves they rely on. Red Rock's got about 15, and he picks them based on the rider. Seems to know what each cowboy's weakness is before they even climb on." As if sensing their conversation, Red Rock turned his massive head toward them. For a moment, bull and cowboy studied each other across the steel barriers. Lane felt something he'd never experienced before. Not fear, but a recognition that this ride would be different from anything he'd ever attempted. "Still planning to go through with it?" Tommy asked. Lane's answer came without hesitation. More than ever. The crowd in the arena had grown restless. Word of the Red Rock Challenge had spread like wildfire, and people were streaming in from the parking lots and concession stands. The announcers had caught wind of the story too, and their voices crackled over the loudspeakers with barely contained excitement. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have a special treat today. Young Lane Frost from Oklahoma has signed up to challenge the unbeatable Red Rock. This bull has sent 309 cowboys home empty-handed. Will today be number 310? Back in the rider preparation area, Lane went through his final routine. He wrapped his hand methodically, the tape forming perfect spirals around his knuckles and palm. Other cowboys watched in respectful silence. They might think he was crazy, but they recognized the focus of a true competitor. Jake Stevens appeared at his elbow one last time. "Lane, there ain't no shame in walking away. That bull's ended careers." Lane looked up from his hand wrapping, his eyes clear and determined. "Jake, I've been riding bulls since I was old enough to climb a fence. Every single one of them was supposed to be unrideable until somebody rode them. Maybe today's that day for Red Rock." The announcement echoed across the arena. "Red Rock and Lane Frost, you're up." The walk to the chutes felt like stepping into history. Lane carried his rigging over his shoulder, his boots steady on the dusty ground despite the electricity crackling through the air. The crowd had grown silent, 20,000 people holding their collective breath as they watched the young cowboy approach what many considered an impossible challenge. Red Rock was already loaded in chute number 7, his massive frame filling the space completely. The bull stood perfectly still, as if he knew exactly what was coming and was savoring the anticipation. Lane climbed the rails with fluid grace, settling onto the back of the animal that had humbled every rider before him. "Take your time, son," called Tommy Morrison from below. He ain't going nowhere. But Lane wasn't rushing. He worked his rigging with the same methodical precision he brought to every ride, adjusting the rope until it felt perfect in his grip. Red Rock remained motionless beneath him, a coiled spring waiting for the moment of release. The arena fell silent except for the creak of leather and the distant flutter of flags in the breeze. Lane wrapped his hand, pulled his rope tight, and for the first time since signing up, allowed himself to truly feel the magnitude of the moment. 309 failures. Every single cowboy who'd tried this had walked away defeated. "You ready?" asked the gate man, his hand poised on the latch. Lane nodded once, his jaw set with determination. "Let's see what all the fuss is about." The gate swung open, and Red Rock exploded into the arena like a force of nature unleashed. But something was different this time. Instead of the calculated, methodical bucking that had defeated so many riders, the bull seemed to hesitate for just a fraction of a second, as if sensing something unusual about the cowboy on his back. Lane moved with Red Rock rather than against him, reading each twist and turn like he was part of the animal itself. When the bull spun left, Lane was already there. When Red Rock launched into his signature high kick, Lane rode it like he'd been practicing it his whole life. 3 seconds, 4 seconds. The crowd began to murmur. Red Rock tried his wickedest move, a sudden direction change that had launched dozens of cowboys into the dirt. But Lane anticipated it. shifting his weight at precisely the right moment and staying centered as the bull twisted beneath him. 6 seconds. 7 seconds. The arena erupted. 20,000 people were on their feet screaming as they witnessed something they'd never thought they'd see. Red Rock, sensing that his usual tactics weren't working, threw everything he had into one final, desperate series of bucks. The buzzer sounded. 8 seconds, but Lane stayed on for another 2, finally dismounting with a graceful leap that landed him safely in the dirt. Red Rock stopped bucking immediately, turning to look at the cowboy with what seemed almost like respect. The arena exploded into chaos. Cowboys vaulted the rails to reach Lane, their voices lost in the deafening roar of the crowd. Tommy Morrison stood frozen by the chutes, his mouth agape as he watched his invincible bull calmly trot toward the exit gate. Lane picked up his hat, dusted it off, and placed it back on his head with the same casual confidence he'd shown when signing up for the ride. As reporters and fellow cowboys surrounded him, someone shouted over the noise, "How'd you know you could do it?" Lane's answer was pure Oklahoma honesty. "I didn't know I couldn't." The scoreboard flashed the official time, 8 seconds, ending Red Rock's unprecedented winning streak. But more than that, it marked the moment when a young cowboy from Atoka proved that sometimes the biggest obstacles fall not to experience or strategy, but to pure heart and an unshakable belief that anything is possible. In the history books of professional rodeo, that day would be remembered as the afternoon when Lane Frost didn't just ride Red Rock, he rode into legend.